Happy snowy Tuesday and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, the big headline, not counting the snow, in New Haven has been the arrest of New Haven's until recent police chief, Carl Jacobson. And the big news was not that he got arrested. We knew that was coming for stealing confidential informant money, according to him. But that he had this huge gambling problem. $4.4 million he bet in 1 year on his phone. And he stole allegedly $180,000 from the city. So there's one man in New Haven who's been all over this larger story for years now. Matter of fact, they talked about it all over the country, including on The Daily Show. And it's Jonathan D. Cohen. He's the author of Losing Big, America's Reckless Bet on Sports Gambling. And he's going to help me and you and some of our readers figure out, how does someone bet $4.4 million on his phone in a year when he makes $180,000 a year? Jonathan Cohen, thanks so much for coming on the air. Jonathan was going to be in the studio today, but it's a snow day, so he's home with the kids and joining us by Zoom. How you doing, Jonathan?
Good. Hopefully the kids will not be joining this interview as well.
And they're very welcome to this community radio, so they're welcome to. So, Jonathan, you know, we had done an event more than a year ago when your book came out. It's been a big splash. People are asking your advice all over the place nationally. What was it like in your hometown after you worked on a project like this to see a headline, this crazy headline about this police chief who was a very good police chief, and it turned out he was allegedly stealing all this money to feed a gambling habit. What'd you think when you saw that?
Well, first of all, I'll give you credit because you were the one who broke the news for me, or when you tell me, say, "Hey, have you heard about this?" So thank you to Paul Bass and the Independent. On the one hand, it's crazy, and the stars align, the coincidence, right? It's sort of too much to bear. On the other hand, as what I sort of noted in the piece I wrote for the Independent, this is going to happen all over the place, in all sorts of towns, all sorts of cities, and all sorts of countries in the 32 states that have legalized online sports gambling, and the 41 that have legalized some form of gambling. So on the one hand, this is a really, really local, crazy story that had happened, a couple blocks away from me. On the other hand, this could have happened anywhere, and I just happen to live here.
And you wrote a great article about that. I recommend everyone going to the Independent, where Jonathan talks about how all these states, including Connecticut, legalize sports gambling and basically open the door for companies like DraftKings to put crack on your phone, basically, if you're a gambling addict, and just have you gamble day, all night, and all day on everything. But I want to ask you, Jonathan, on radio today, to help us understand something about how gambling works, because I assume that as part of your book, you spent time looking at how the algorithms are set up and how these sites are set up. So Carl Jacobson said, it's in the affidavit he was secretly recorded, saying, he was betting on FanDuel and DraftKings, and he did $4.4 million of gambling wagers in 1 year. He makes $180,000. As Supercat asked in the comments section, where did Jacobson get $4.4 million to gamble?
Right. So this is sort of the dirty secret, and there's no allegation that he stole $4.4 million.
Right, it's 180, yeah.
Exactly, of anything of that magnitude. But
85, I'm sorry, 85,000 what he stole.
So sports betting is just a low margin business, even for the companies involved. And a good professional gambler is going to hope to win 52% of the time, 55% of the time. Because on average, you're going to get, let's say, about 95% of the money back, 90 to 95% when you bet. So it's like if I go to the store, buy something for $100, I get 90% of my money back. I put that $90 back in, I get 90% back. Okay, now I've spent $190, or I've gambled $190.
But
I still have $80 in my pocket.
Okay.
And this is how someone, especially if they're doing well, they have a hot streak. I'm sure Carl Jacobson did at some point have a hot streak where he was winning a lot of money. You could build up a big bankroll. He probably, you work $180,000 up to $1 million, let's say, but then you gamble through that, and then you gamble through it 3 or 4 times, and every time you gamble, folks might know, if I want to bet $100 to win 110, I'm more likely.
So theoretically, you could have $10,000 and bet $1 million.
Yes, more. And I've talked to people who and this is not a problem in Connecticut. It is a problem in Maine, where you get slammed on the tax end, where I never bet $1 million. I never had $1 million, but you cycled through the money so fast you owe taxes as if you had gambled $1 million.
Oh, that makes me wonder, because we'll get later in the show to your solutions. But I wonder if you did that same tax in Connecticut, if at least after a year, someone like Carl Jacobson wouldn't have been able to morning to night, place bets without much money, and have it up to $1 million if he was going to have to spend $100,000 in taxes.
Right. Not that I want to slam people who are addicted to gambling and have no money with a tax bill, but like maybe you're right. Like this would have a year ago.
Or maybe they can't help themselves. I mean, that's part of what underlies some what you wrote, Jonathan. Can people help it? People who gamble at this level, and from what I got reading your book, it seems to me it's similar to Budweiser when they're really focused on the person who drinks 6 beers a day. They're really not focused on the person who drinks 1. Even though it's maybe only 1% of the people who gamble are that severe like this, they account for a big chunk of the money these companies make, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the companies, and I've talked to company officials at FanDuel and DraftKings who claim they want to be the companies that make a little bit of money from everybody, but in fact,
that's bullshit, right? Yeah.
It's not how the business model actually works, right? In the 2023-2024 NFL season, 82% of the revenue from NFL gamblers came from just 3% of people. So some of those people are Phil Mickelson, Michael Jordan, these sort of famous rich people who notoriously gamble a lot of money. But a lot of them are probably the Carl Jacobsons of the world. He made over the course of 2025, he made on average 3 to 4 deposits per day into his.
That's all? It was only 3 to 4?
Yeah, that's it.
So,
yeah.
I thought it'd be more actually. No, I mean it. Are those bigger bets than we thought? Does he bet 10,000 at a time?
It could be. It could. There's 2 questions there. Is it how much is he betting, like per bet, and then also how much is the size of each deposit? So it could be 3 or 4 deposits of $500 each, $1,000 each. And then he's out of money until payday.
So does it work? Because I've never been on these. Does it work that you deposit money, then you can start betting?
Yes.
So you deposit $500. Because if he did $15 a day, I don't think that gets you to $4 million in a year.
Right. And again, but this is where if he wins a couple, his bankroll goes up, and he gambles with that money. All of a sudden, that sort of counts against what he's gambled with.
And this is the way my understanding, very cursory, of how the table works in Vegas. Is it set up so that you talked about a good professional gambler can make 52%, win 52% of the time. But they watch you, right? They're set up so in the end, they're going to make a profit. So is it fair to say that they're going to make sure, even if you think you're good gambling, they're going to string you along by having you win a lot of bets, but in the end, you're always going to lose?
It's even worse than that. It's to continue your Vegas comparison. It's the equivalent of once they realize you have an edge that you're counting cards, they'll escort you out of the casino. In the same way, once someone like Carl Jacobson, if he's gambling $4.4 million and he's consistently winning in a way that the sportsbook algorithm deems is sort of sustainable, that they realize he's actually going to make money over the long term, he'll be shown the door. So I know people who can't bet more than 5 cents on an NBA game because the sportsbook realize that they can win consistently, so they get.
And why is that? Because they're so smart and they know basketball so well.
These are professional gamblers who have all these algorithms and.
So it's set up so that if you get good enough, you can never win. But then there's the psychology of the addict. Why can't the addict? So if the addict knows I can't really win, and the addict feels like I won a lot of money today, so I'm going to keep going. Now I'm going to pay off my bills because he obviously had years worth of debts going here. Why don't they stop if intellectually they know? These are intelligent people. They intellectually know the house isn't going to let them walk away with this. They think they're going to be the only one?
I think some of them aren't listening to New Haven community radio, so some of them don't know that it can't win, right? They don't know that the companies will cut them off. And then once you're at a point of an addiction, and I was really careful in the piece not to sort of come from the top rope and outside and say that Carl Jacobson has an addiction. He never said he did.
But he described the activity of an addict, and he did have a drinking problem, AA, and he's had gambling. Yeah,
absolutely. It certainly resembles. Yeah, you're right. That's sort of as close as I was going to get. It resembles someone who has a gambling addiction, and someone who does have a gambling addiction, to your point, cannot just say, "Okay, I'm done," and they cannot just stop. It is like asking someone who's addicted to heroin or cocaine or another sort of substance that they ingest into their body to just stop, and they can't. You're sort of chemically dependent on the high that you get from that product, and gambling works in the exact same way.
So he has the years police chief. He deals with a lot of high pressure situations within the department. People have problems that come up. He was a chief who was very close to victims and families and shooters. He was in the community, so he would go to funerals and talk about the kids who died. He's under a lot of pressure. What happens chemically with someone who has an addiction and they're reaching in their pocket? What kind of bets are they making while they're on their way to a funeral, while they're into a staff meeting? How does it work? How fast does it take? And what happens to their brain?
Yeah. So the dangers with the app is that you can gamble on anything at any time, right? There you can gamble on, until recently, the speed of a pitch in a baseball game, a serve.
That changed?
the MLB is trying to change it because of the scandals with the Cleveland Guardians pitchers.
But that's just MLB. So in basketball, can you say, like, I think so-and-so is going to get...
Who's going to hit the next free throw? Yeah, something like that. Right. So, and this is sort of mimicking the slot machine. And Connecticut, by the way, is one of 7 states that does have online slot machines on your cell phone also. But it's sort of mimicking that phenomenon where you can sort of, every time you open the app, there's a new thing to bet on, whether it's a game tonight or whether it's the Malaysian women's doubles badminton tournament happening around the world, but it's 3 a.m. and you need something to gamble on, or you're on your way to a funeral or whatever the case may be.
And is with an addict, is that the thing that makes you feel better, like someone who might hit a vape pipe if you're like addicted to tobacco and you really need to feel that calm, or you hit the are you hitting the gambling crack pipe with your phone?
A little bit. I mean, not having done crack myself, I don't want to say for certain, but a little bit. I think what someone who's addicted to gambling, what they're addicted to is not winning money, and it's not money at all. It is the moment of uncertainty while you have a bet and you're waiting to find out what is going to happen with the outcome of the bet. I've talked to people who were literally gambling on minor league British darts in the middle of the night and were described as basically flipping a coin of like who they were going to bet on. But for 10, 15 seconds, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, you have $20 on the line or $20,000 on the line.
So is that a dopamine rush?
Yes.
Okay, so rush. What happens afterwards? Now, if you lose, is the reaction, I'll get it back twice next? Or if you win, is there another kind of high?
Well, so if you lose, right, it is, a chasing phenomenon. Okay, I lost $20, but I'm going to bet 40. I'm going to double down. I'm going to keep going. Oh, that was just unlucky. I'm going to get the next one. And then if you win, and then even if you do win, it's sort of like needing or either way, really, it's needing a larger dose of the drug to get the same high that you got before, to get the same experience, to get the same rush, so to speak.
And can you ever get the same, like some studies, I've never done crack either, is that the first time you hit the crack pipe, it's such an intense pleasure that the rest of your life consists of trying to replicate that, but you never can at the same level.
Yeah, I think to a degree, I think that this is why you see all these promotions for sports gambling companies, like for your first bet, like your first bet is risk-free, is what they call it. If you lose your first bet, you get your money back, because they want you to win your first bet. They want you to develop this overconfidence that's going to be really, really hard to shake. So you could win your first bet, lose your next 9, and you'll be like, I'm just on a bad streak. I'm good at this. And
so is it fair to say that the people who designed these apps, once the Connecticut legislature said you're free to now prey on everybody, that is it accurate to say that really most of what they really care about are the Carl Jacobsons? Like everybody else is sort of minorly concerned for them. It's the Carl Jacobsons who every day are making bets just to keep getting that dopamine rush. They can go through millions in a year. And do they deliberately set it up so that because we keep getting back to this 4.4 million number that has me and our readers really puzzled. I mean, you explain to it very well. It's a little bit at a time. They keep going and you get it in your account. But do they set it up so that you really can win? Like you could bet 4.4 million, so it's sort of like Monopoly money where you will get 4.1, so you feel like you won 4.1. And so what they're really going is not to get you to win 4 million from you. He's talked about low margin business, but to get 200,000 and change like he lost.
Yeah. Depends who you believe. So it's sort of, right? Again, the companies say all the right things. They've said it to me. They said it over text to me in response to the article in the Independent. One of them saw it and sort of sent me some angry texts. And
oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know where and how he saw it. He's not a New Haven resident, but he saw it and he's like, "Oh, you should focus on the guardrails that we do have in place." Blah blah blah. And so again, they say all the right things. They say they want to make $20 from Paul, $20 from John, $20 from Harry, whoever. But in reality, the business model does fundamentally rely on the Carl Jacobsons on the big losers.
And is the idea to let them feel like they're better? Is 4.4 million a little bit fictional in the sense that, as you said, he never had 4.4 million. But is it set up so that you can build up that high amount so that they get the margin on you? Like they're not going to get 200,000 from Carl Jacobson on his salary in a day. So is it set up that he'll win enough that he'll lose?
A little bit, but the problem is that like the bets that the companies market, if you open up the app, which you've never done, but if you open up the app, it'll be like Charles Barkley's same game parlay of the day. Or truly, this will be what it is. It's like, here are some picks that allegedly Charles Barkley likes, aka someone at the company told him to put his name on, and they're always terrible. They're like guaranteed ways to lose money. So it's not like the company sort of, because you're right, they want this to be the frog in the pot, right? They don't want to just take
Well, they can't. They can't get $200,000 out of Carl Jacobs in a day on his salary. But if they get him betting all day and winning enough, do they then? Is that the best strategy for getting $200,000 out of him in a year?
Right. You can shear sheep many times, but you can only slaughter it once. And I think their preference is to sort of shear, and then knowing that at some point this is going to slaughter. Again, I don't know if this is their preference, but this is the way the business model works in practice, is that this is the result. That's
so interesting. We're talking to Jonathan Deacon, who has studied the business model of sports gambling, first publishing the book on what's happening in America, Losing Big, America's Reckless Bet on Sports Gambling, and has since been in conversation with pretty much, I think, everybody who cares about this in America, which is a growing number of people, right?
And now it's you, I'm glad to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So this made me think of another thing was now betting platforms are big, not with sports. So prediction markets. A lot of people bet every day now on who's going to win an election. And I read an article the other day in Wall Street Journal that suggested this might not be a bad thing. They're claiming that prediction markets might work better than polls to say what people think where to put the money. I'm a little skeptical. Heather Joseph says, yes, sir. Thanks for listening, Heather. I'm a little skeptical of that, Jonathan, maybe because I don't have the expertise because of the pool of people who will gamble in a futures market. Do they really represent the public at large, or do they represent some kind of received wisdom that's smarter than the polls? Like, do you see the rise in futures markets and prediction markets like this as just sort of on steroids, what you've been writing about sports gambling?
Yeah. So let me be really, really clear. And why is someone who works in sports gambling policy working on prediction markets? And here's why. It's cool and fun and sexy to talk about the fact that you can gamble on, the words President Trump is going to say at the State of the Union.
God, I don't think that's cool or sexy at all. I think it's like,
it's interesting.
For they're like people are picking my pocket every time I try to turn around.
No, but it's interesting. It's sort of a novelty. It's like, what, you can gamble on who's going to be in Taylor Swift's wedding. I get that that's sort of an interesting topic. 90% of the trading volume on Kalshi, which is the largest prediction market operating in the United States today, 90% of the trading volume is on sports. So as much as this is...
So you don't think, because Heather Joseph writes, trying to let them gamble on the planes was too crazy. But when an election comes, Jonathan, is it still 90%? Because people are worried about this interfering with...
Yeah. It's still a lot. It's still really high. Like when there's no NFL season, when there's no NBA season, and there's no midterm election, these things just die off. They really are a novelty. What they are is a backdoor for people who are 18, 19, and 20. Yeah, sports gambling is 21 plus. And for people in states like California, Texas, Utah, Minnesota, Georgia that don't have legal online sports gambling, it's a way for them to gamble on sports.
So you're not going where I'm going with my narrow take on all this, which is that when I look at crypto, when I look at the way financial deregulation, when I'm looking at the rollback of the Dodd-Frank bill and the limits on safety in terms of how you can invest, which I would consider a form of gambling. I'm wondering if in society at large, hypercharged by the Trump administration's embrace of deregulation and because of how much money they can make on it, whether we're more broadly moving into a moment in our country where everything of value can no longer be put in your bed or batten down the hatches, that basically it's open season by predators with sophisticated algorithms on picking everyone's pocket in a different way.
I totally agree. And I don't mean to sort of deflect from these sort of danger to democracy components of prediction markets. I just, to be really clear, that these are sports betting platforms with a bunch of politics stuff underneath, not the other way around.
And also, to your point, if it's 90% sports gambling, there's a specific kind of addiction here.
And young and user base of, we assume, young men who are But to your point, I've talked before about this is not a word, but the gamification of American culture.
Yeah.
And, the Taylor Swift wedding. The Taylor Swift wedding is a real example.
I didn't even know about that.
Oh yeah, you don't have a lot. I have money on you to be a bridesmaid. But
that's a good bet, actually. Yeah,
I think so.
I don't know how you found that out.
But the thesis is, and the companies say this. The companies say this explicitly. Like, you can leverage your knowledge about anything into money. And I'm like, can we not? Do we have to leverage my knowledge about Taylor Swift into a way to make money? Why can't I just like Taylor Swift? Like, why is it?
I'm more concerned about like money, like bank failures and where the crypto company crash is going to sink the economy and put us in recession.
Well, I was just talking to someone in fintech yesterday who said there's a really clear divide in the space. This is a journalist named Alex Johnson. He says there's a really clear divide in the financial technology space. Companies that want you to build wealth and are building cool apps to help you build wealth, like banking platforms that are now sort of online or sort of incentivize you to save money. And then the rest of the industry, which is the exact opposite, which is trying to extract you from your money as fast as possible, to prey on people who don't think they're ever going to be able to build wealth, and are trying to get you to basically either literally or figuratively gamble, whether it's on investment platform, whether it's on crypto, whether it's on a prediction market, whether it's on sports betting. And those are proliferating, especially among young people who don't see sort of a hope for a financial future otherwise.
And this is not going to sound antediluvian here, but when I was recently on a business trip to Lansing, Illinois, which is a very, this is like a 20,000 community an hour south of Chicago. So their whole downtown and commercial base is completely devastated, gone. And I would walk into a store or a restaurant, and they all had slot machines. It's legalized slot machines in Illinois. And I just saw people look pretty down and out, just sitting in those machines, just constantly fitting in the quarters. And I just wondering whether this gamification is spreading out in every way, and if it's because the state legislature is so well told in your book, by the way, Jonathan, Losing Big, that they addicted to the money they're getting from gambling, and are they going to therefore make most of America unsophisticated, especially addicts, the prey on which they keep our state coffers flush?
The short answer is yes. In my previous book is about the American state lottery system, and my whole argument is that you can think the lottery players are delusional, but wait until you hear the politicians who enacted the lottery thinking it was going to solve all their tax problems, who are just as delusional as all these lottery players. But this is what's crazy is companies the states seem reluctant to revise sports gambling model in the name of public health and safety. But there's one state in the country that gets more than 1% of its revenue from sports betting, and that's Montana. Connecticut gets less than 1% of its taxable revenue from sports gambling, and yet we're sort of causing harm to all the Carl Jacobsons in the name of, a drop in the bucket, so to speak, for the state. So that's why I sort of don't get it. And I think maybe the companies have less of a hold on the state legislatures than we might think, which gives hope to someone like me that maybe we can actually change things and make them better over the long run.
All right, so let's talk about that. We're talking to Jonathan D. Cohen, Losing Big, America's Reckless Bet on Sports Gambling. When we saw this police chief scandal, he was allegedly betting over $4 million a year on a small salary and then dipping into the confidential informant fund and the youth athletic league fund. We did have, the editor here was pointing out, we did have other gambling scandals right before we legalized gambling here, if I have my timeline right. Michael DeMasso was the state rep in West Haven, New Haven. He was going to the casinos and he stole a lot of ARPA money. And I remember when we had the first scandal with confidential informant money back in 2008, or the most recent scandal, there was also a police officer who was caught up in that, the FBI arrested in New Haven, who during the day was just running a gambling parlor on on Worcester Street. And I remember even back further, there was kind of a regular thing.
That would have been great. I should have gone to that.
Yeah, and just I'm back in the day. I remember all day, even cops would be going to bookies. So it's not like gambling is new. Is it more has legalized sports betting with the algorithms on your phone just made it such a difference in scale? Like, could you have done 4.4 million in a year before like that?
Yeah, you could have if you wanted to
at the casino.
Or if you had the right bookie, or a lot of bookies by the early 2000s had these websites. They're basically just worse versions of the sports betting app. So they're not as sleek, they're not as addictive, but you could run through a lot of money really fast if you had access to capital like that. And this was the sort of the feedback I got from the industry source who read the piece in the Independent was. And this is what the industry always says about everything, by the way, is like, oh, why don't you focus on the black market? Oh, you think that this guy who had an alcohol problem didn't start gambling until 2021? Yeah, right. This guy must have been on a bookie. He must have been going to any of these casinos and so on, which is, I think, probably fair.
But is it fair to say he didn't get in that much trouble before the way he did now?
Right, and there, with the caveat that there's an ongoing investigation to assess whether this dates back as early as 2019 or possibly earlier, his sort of misappropriation of funds. But it's one thing yes, we've always had gambling, we're always going to have gambling, whether it's bookies or numbers games or whatever the case may be. But it's another thing to put an app on your phone where you can lose multiple mortgage payments on Malaysian women's doubles badminton over the course of 5 minutes. So I think we've increased the size of the pie by so much in terms of the number of people who are gambling, which, fine, not inherently bad. But I think the version of gambling we have has also sort of increased the slice of that pie that represents people who run into gambling-related harm. So I think we've sort of done two things. You're not necessarily going to increase the number of people I guess you are. The number of people who run into gambling harm sort of proportionally increases when you increase the number of people who are gambling. especially when you get the sort of supercharged, addictive version of sports gambling that we have.
So if someone was addicted to cough syrup, you're now shoveling crack into their phone.
Yeah, I liken it to lacing your heroin with cocaine to
right,
our
or
drug
fentanyl.
Because you're taking your phone, which is technically not addictive, but we all know I think is basically addictive, and you're putting this actually chemically addictive product of gambling onto your cell phone.
Wow. So Jonathan, in your book and an article you wrote recently for a group you're involved with, the American Institute for Boys and Men, which I wanted to ask you about, you have a lot of suggestions of what could be done. And I got the sense, if it's correct, that we all at different levels, the gamblers, the government, the companies, that there's stuff that can be done. You talked about affordability constraints, like if the app could pick up whether someone can afford it, they can't afford all this money they're gambling, like they don't make enough money to be gambling $4 million, they would check on it. How would that work? And how could you count on a company doing that if their whole business model is based on doing the opposite?
Right. So some of these things would have to be required legislatively, and the affordability constraint is an interesting idea. Whether it be legal because of privacy concerns is sort of that's not my problem. I'm not a lawyer, so someone else can deal with that. But the name of the game here for any recommendation is friction. Right? Is to slow down the ability to deposit money into the app, make it easier to get money out of the app, and to reduce the sleekness of the app and the sort of smooth brain dopamine delivery while you're using it. And so whether an affordability constraint, for example, in the case of Carl Jacobson, would have flagged many months ago that someone with $180,000 salary is gambling $4.4 million between two different apps.
How would they know about the salary?
This is the thing. So I have talked to an executive at a sports gambling company who they've been in behind the scenes conversations with a credit bureau. And so the sports gambling company can't get, I think, thank God for this. The
right.
sports gambling company can't get your credit bureau data, but they could partner with someone, a credit, and say, okay, we have this person. Are they credit worthy? Just generally speaking, like, can you give us a letter grade, for example, on their credit worthiness? Here are the last 4 digits of their social security number. The credit card, the credit company could say this person makes $180,000 a year, or this person makes this much money a year. DraftKings, FanDuel could automatically say, okay, that's crazy. That they should not be gambling this amount. So it's a little complicated. It would be behind the scenes, and the companies don't want to do it, or the companies are certainly have the capacity to do it, and so far have not. And so this is why it could be imposed legislatively or regulatorily if the companies are not going to sort of self-regulate and put up the guardrails.
Is it like cigarette companies? They always tried their best to get around everything that was posed on them, but there were certain restraints on advertising that and levels of tar, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that still were put into place. So it was imperfect. People still got addicted and died of lung cancer.
This industry is so slippery, and you probably try to put a guardrail on it, and they're going to try to slither under it or over it or around it in some way. But I'm naive, but I'm sort of taking the people I meet with from the industry at face value when they say we want to do right. We have 16.
Well, they're in business, so if they say there's enough of an outcry, if enough people read your book and watch the Daily Show, maybe they're a little concerned that then the legislators will want to do something, so they have to get out in front.
Which is why the cigarette industry self-regulated to try to ward off congressional action. That ultimately failed, but they did it, and it bought them a few decades before Congress cramped down.
And now they're doing better than ever because of the e-vape and everything.
And the next conversation, yeah.
What about loss limits and deposit limits? How would that work?
Yeah, so these are so. First of all, one of the reasons I like this idea is because Flutter, which is FanDuel's parent company, has these in place in the United Kingdom for any user of their platform under the age of 25. So this is, you cannot lose, you are limited in the number of times you can deposit money into your app, or how much money you can deposit into your app, or how much money you can lose. Once you lose $1,000 over the course of the month, I'm just making up that number, you're cut off and say, okay, Paul, no more Malaysian women's doubles badminton for you until next month. And this would be exactly what I'm describing is a point of friction, where it's like some entity outside of you, because once your brain is sort of addicted to gambling, you're never going to stop. Some entity outside of yourself that is going to stop you from gambling or from losing as much money as you want. And that's what we need in any form. And those are, I think, two promising ideas to me.
Will that delay your moment of truth when you have to deal with your addiction? So you'll maybe instead of 4 million over a year, you do 4 million over 4 years, or maybe that's better.
Right.
Maybe that's better.
It is better. No, I mean, it gives you more points, more pull-up points. I mean, the criticism is, okay, it's great if FanDuel adopts this, but then I'll just go gamble on DraftKings. Or if DraftKings adopts it too, I'm just going to go back to my bookie. And so that's sort of a fair line of criticism and a fair critique. But I still think it's better. And I still think there's a lot of Carl Jacobs is not a young man, no offense to him. But there are a lot of young men in particular who would never bother to call up a bookie or go on one of these black market websites, who, if you put a bunch of speed bumps on FanDuel and DraftKings, are not going to run into trouble. Full stop. And I think if you could do that, it would sort of solve a lot of the problems.
You had some other interesting ideas too, I thought, Jonathan. You talked about safe platform design and push notifications. And boy, everything's about push notifications in every way we interact with the world now, right? Do you think that's realistic? Do you think that's what happened? We don't know what happened with Carl, but people like Carl, are they getting notifications on their phone about Charles Barkley's bets?
Well, okay, so I couldn't put this in print, and because this is too speculative. But if Carl Jacobson was gambling $3.1 million with FanDuel alone over the course of 2025, I would bet, a lot of money that there was a person at FanDuel who was his sort of customer relations person who was sending him promo offers and bonuses and potential gifts. This is a tried and true practice of the casino industry. The sportsbook do it themselves. I'm entirely speculating here, but I've talked to VIP hosts, including the former VIP host for FanDuel for the state of Connecticut, and there is no way that someone gambling that amount of money did not receive sort of special customer attention from someone at the company. So again, this is speculative. I don't know how you'd find out this information. You'd have to talk to FanDuel. They're never going to say anything. But you're
talking about the profile. You're talking about the profile of people like Carl.
VIP hosts, they're called. Yeah. So putting aside push notifications and emails that are scheduled to arrive on your payday, which was something the companies do, they'll get as personal as you once you identified yourself as a Carl Jacobson, as someone in that sort of bucket of people who are willing to gamble a lot of money. The companies will do anything they can to sort of keep you in line and keep you gambling with their platform specifically.
And so would you like to see the legislature require this stuff as well as taxing more to cover public health measures?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, I'd love to see the legislature require any amount of friction. Again, this is not applied to Carl, but someone's like, especially for younger people, people under the age of 30, for example, who are at risk, their prefrontal cortex is developed to stop them from getting into these problems in the first place. They're so socialized to gambling of all kinds. And a lot of them don't know better. I'll speak for myself. When I was like in my 20s, I don't know if I would have known any better. But thank God I didn't have these apps on my phone at the time. So, and that this is something the legislature could do, whether the funding comes from the gambling money itself or whether it comes elsewhere, I don't know. But it's certainly something that I think the state should do, and is a long-term sort of investment. Because we get a lot of money up front from gambling, but then what are the long-term costs? The long-term costs are things like Carl Jacobson.
We're talking to Jonathan D. Cohen, author of Losing Big, America's Reckless Bet on Sports Gambling. He lives in New Haven, and he's one of the whisperers nationwide to companies and others who are interested in how to deal with this epidemic that's developing. Is that fair to say?
I would love to say otherwise, but I think it's fair. Yes.
So, Jonathan, how'd you get into this?
Through luck, haha. I wrote my doctoral dissertation is a history of the American state lottery system, which is my previous book. And as I was finishing that book, was the sort of explosion of sports betting, and it went online in Connecticut in October of 2021, New York, a little bit later, Massachusetts right after. And so I would do press for the lottery book, and I kept getting questions about sports gambling. And I'm a sports fan, I'm not averse to gambling, sure. So I sort of kept my eye on it. And then I was really just waiting for someone to write a book about it, and no one was doing it. So I said, "Fine, I'll do it." And I wrote what is, as you know, sort of a short encapsulation.
Very, very well done book. You told great stories about people. What I love about your book is you really, in a sympathetic way, told me about the people going through this, and then you also traced the way legislators, who even might have thought they had some good motives when they were starting to talk to sports companies, really got taken for a ride willingly. But so what is the American Institute for Boys and Men? You're working there now?
Yeah, so this is my new full-time job. So I when the book came out, I would do book events, including one that you did with me, which I appreciate, and I go on the Daily Show, whatever. But it was a lot of like me, and I'd advise other groups who were working on this issue, advocates. But it was just me. It was just like in my spare time, and I now work at the American Institute for Boys and Men, where I lead what we're calling a hub on sports gambling, which is sponsored by Arnold Ventures, which is we have basically a small think tank with the mission to reduce harm from gambling, specifically for young men and boys.
And you're leading that, okay?
And I'm now leading this work for the organization. We're going to work. The organization itself is going to work on a whole host of issues, affecting the well-being of young men and boys.
But why boys and men? Why not both genders or all genders?
So well, the organization's mission is focused on men and boys for reasons that I'm happy to talk about. And I don't want to downplay the possibility that women would run into problems or addictions from gambling. I just think it is the concentration of harm is so disproportionate among.
That's interesting. What percent of problem sports gamblers are male?
Of problem gamblers, there are estimates. I don't want to put a specific number on it. A lot,
like over 80%.
A majority, if not a large majority.
Over 80%, you think?
Specific for sports gamblers, I would say so. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that's a little speculative on my part, but I think that's fair to say. And this is the point I want to make earlier. Sorry that I missed and I didn't get to include in the article was even if we put aside addiction, an actual addiction, and putting the dramatic stories like Carl Jacobson, there's a lot of people sort of on this spectrum of harm who are never going to have an addiction, but who are running into trouble with sports gambling. And I think organizationally, we don't want to sort of lose sight. We don't want to sort of focus too narrowly on addiction as the problem. Whereas I think someone, losing $1,500, deleting the app, coming back 6 weeks later, putting $1,500 again, that person's not addicted, but something bad is happening to them, or their well-being is being negatively affected. And that's the kind of thing that at the American Institute for Boys and Men, we want to focus on, because that is happening. It is happening more to men, more to younger men, and no one else is going to do something about it, so we have to.
Jonathan Cohen is a man on a mission. It looks like you're trying very hard to do something difficult, which is reverse this quick slide we're doing into lifelong addiction we're creating among sports gamblers in their pocket with their phones. So thank you, Jonathan, for the work you do, and thanks for chatting with us about it on Dateline New Haven. I got to admit, it's pretty fascinating. And
I'm glad it only took 40 minutes, but I'm glad you're willing to admit it.
And I'm gonna put odds that you're gonna have success and an impact, even if you can't wipe out the whole thing.
Put them on a prediction market. I'd love to book that action. Yeah.
All right, and we want to thanks Harry Drost behind the controls on this snow day. We're gonna take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free" from the group CD "A Plea for Peace." This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day, all night, and all week long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.